Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Van Build Tech Talks with Curt. I'm Curt, and today we're going to be talking about hydronic heating. Before we get started, I want to address the gorilla in the room. I know as you're gazing upon my beautiful face, you're probably wondering, what happened to that guy? Yes, indeed, I got banged up. But we're going to save that for another episode because we got a lot to talk about. Today we're going to jump right in talking about the hydronic water heating system. And in the last video, if you guys remember, if you saw it, and if you didn't, go check it out. But I explained the reasons why I chose this system. And so in short, I was looking for a solution that I could heat water, and I needed to heat two different water sources. I have a recirculating shower and a freshwater system, and those are separate systems, so I wanted to be able to heat the water in each of those systems without having two hot water tanks. And then I wanted an on-demand hot water heater because we take long showers. So with the recirculating shower, we can take 30-minute, hour showers or whatever. And so we didn't want to be limited to the amount of water that's actually in a hot water tank. And then also we wanted to be able to heat the air with that. And then we didn't want to use another fuel source. And so we have diesel in the van, and so we wanted something that we could either tap into that or use electrics. Obviously if you use electrics, it's going to affect your batteries and your solar system and how you size that and all that. And so we really wanted something that we could tap into our existing fuel system. So in our case it's diesel. They make these hydronic heaters for gasoline as well. But that's why we chose this particular system. We also covered the layout, and so we went into detail in terms of how my system is laid out, and we also discussed the various components, and then we discussed how the system worked. And based on that video, we received a lot of questions and comments, and by the way, I just want to say thank you for the comments and the questions. They really are what makes this channel solid, so we appreciate hearing from you guys. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments, or if you just want to give us a heads up. We appreciate the positive words of encouragement as well. Give us a like, turn your subscriptions on, and turn notifications on if you haven't already. But today we're going to take a deeper dive in the system with the main purpose is to answer a lot of the kind of questions that you guys have had. And if I were to group them into two categories, a lot of them were based on maybe needing a bit of more understanding on how the actual hydronic heater itself works, and then how the heat exchanger works. And so we're going to go into detail on that. The purpose of this video is not to cover all the material that I covered in the previous video. So if you still have questions, you may want to go back and watch that video. So if we take a closer look at the hydronic heater, the first thing we do to operate this is we turn the timer on, and then that in turn runs through a sequence of checks inside the heater itself, and then turns on the exhaust fan. The exhaust fan blows air through the system, and so the exhaust fan comes on, it sucks air in and then blows air out to give that burner good fuel. The coolant pump comes on. The coolant is what pumps the coolant through the system, through this hydronic heater so that it can be heated. Now what I'll say in our case, the coolant is actually glycol. You can also use antifreeze. In our case we use a food grade glycol, and that circulates through the system. And then once the coolant pump is on, the go plugs heat up, the fuel pump pumps on, the burner ignites, and the heat. And as that burner ignites, it heats that heat chamber. The coolant is circulated around that superheated chamber, and then the coolant pump pumps it and circulates it through the system, and that's how it heats the coolant. The next thing we need to discuss is the heat exchanger. And so as the coolant is being pumped through the loop of the system, it gets pumped through the heat exchanger. So if you'll notice, the heat exchanger has four ports. Two of those ports, one is an in and out for the coolant, the other is an in and out for the water. Okay, so let's focus first on the coolant line. If you were to cut this back inside this, and mine, you can get these in different configurations, but my heat exchanger has 30 stainless steel plates inside of it. And so what happens is the coolant comes in there, it's only allowed to make contact with one side of the plate, each of those metal plates, those stainless steel plates. And so it superheats those plates. Now, and so in this example, in this graphic that I'm showing you, the red would be the coolant. And so in those other inlets, the water is pumped through there. It makes contact with the other sides of the plates, the 30 plates, as it's pumped through that heat exchanger. So the coolant and the water never make contact, but they both make contact with the same plate, and that's how the heat exchange takes place. Now this happens very fast, and we're dealing with a small amount of water over a lot of surface area, so it's truly an on-demand water heater. We haven't had a case where the heater has ever had a problem keeping up, in other words, and making the water hot on demand, and so it works quite well for us. But that's kind of how it works. But the short version of it is that the coolant goes into the heat exchanger and comes out of the heat exchanger, loops back to the heater, so we have a continuous heating situation there, and the water is pumped through there and comes out either the faucet or the shower as hot water, and the two never commingle. And so here you can see the line coming out of the hydronic heater, going into the brazed plate stainless steel heat exchanger. It comes out the other side and goes right back, and that continues in the loop. Now in another graphic, what I want to do is I want to add the water. And so you can see here how the fresh water is pumped from my freshwater tank, and before it gets to the heat exchanger there's a T. And so that cold water then can either be pumped to my faucet, or it can go up to the heat exchanger. If it goes through the heat exchanger, it comes out on the other side hot, and so what you can see here is that gives me a hot line and a cold line going into my faucet. And so the temperature coming out of the faucet is controlled by the little handle or the mixer on that shower device, and so it works just like a normal faucet. If you turn it left, that's hot. If you turn it right, it's cold, and you can just kind of adjust it in the middle to adjust your temperature, and that's how that works. Once you lift the faucet handle, that releases pressure because water's coming out, the pump comes on, pumps it through the system, and voila, we have water just like you would have in your home. So in my case, I have a separate system, my recirculating shower system and my freshwater system. But many of you don't have a recirculating shower, but you still want hot water in your shower. And so this is what that would look like with one single faucet. Now, if you just wanted to add a shower to that, still using one fresh water tank. In other words, we're not trying to incorporate a recirculating shower. We're using that fresh water, as many of you guys are doing. We're using that same fresh water source for our sink and for our shower. And so really the only thing we need to do then is in the hot water line after the heat exchanger, we add an additional T. And so now this T will allow the hot water to go to either the sink or the shower, and that'll be controlled by whatever one of those two you turn on. We additionally do that with a cold water system. We just add a T to that cold water line, and so now the line can either go up to the sink or it can go up to the shower, again, depending on which one is turned on. Now in my case, I have two different water sources. So I have my fresh water source, which is used for our sink, which is used for dishes, cooking, cleaning up, washing our faces, brushing our teeth, all that other stuff. That's our fresh water source. And then separately, we have a recirculating shower system that has its own tank, and that water, when we take a shower, goes through the shower, goes through a filtration system, comes out the shower, goes down the drain, gets recirculated and scrubbed, and comes right back out the shower. Not water we want to be drinking or cooking with, definitely water we want to be showering with. Two separate systems. And so what we've done here is we've added an extra heat exchanger for the shower. And so if you look at this, what's really cool about this is I'm only using one hydronic heater, but when I come out of the first heat exchanger, I just make that line loop right back into the second heat exchanger, the coolant line, and then the coolant line comes out of that and goes back. And so now the coolant loop, which again never commingles with the water, the coolant line, the coolant loop goes through both heat exchangers, heating both of those up, and circulating back to the pump. So that's what keeps both of those heat exchangers hot when I turn the timer on and kick the hydronic heater on. Now, you might be thinking, well, can I add another heat exchanger? Absolutely, and that's how we heat the air. It's a different type of heat exchanger. I'll go into that in another video. But yes, you can add more heat exchangers to this. These hydronic heaters, they have a lot of capacity in the system and the way we're using. There's not a lot of dissipation of heat, and so we have a ton of capacity. We never experience, when the heater is on, we never experience a time when we don't have hot water. And so it's on demand, and yeah, it just works really good. There is enough time for the water, and that's a question we get a lot. Is there enough time for the water to get heated and passing through those heat exchangers? And absolutely. And so you'll see here, we've added a second heat exchanger. And so just like it in the first scenario, I run my sink through that, the fresh water. For my sink, I run that fresh water through heat exchanger 1. I run my shower through heat exchanger 2. And so again, from my shower tank, I have a line, there's a T. The cold water can either go on to the shower, or it can go up through the heat exchanger. As the water comes out of the heat exchanger, it's hot, and then that travels up to the shower. And so now at my shower, I have a hot water source and I have a cold water source, and I control that water temperature with my shower mixer or shower diverter. And then I can have a nice hot shower as long as my hydronic heater is on and heating up those heat exchangers. I'm good to go. Limitless hot water. We love our own hot showers, guys. Can't say enough about that. But this is how that happens. Now, another thing that I get asked a lot about, because I have all my plumbing, my tanks, a lot of my pumps, my filters, all that stuff is under chassis, and so I get a ton of questions about freezing and all that stuff and how do I protect that. So I'm going to go into that real quick with this system, and it's really easy. If you understand everything up till now, all I do is in the hot water line, I add a T. So let's take the kitchen faucet, for example, or the sink. And so in the hot water line, after the heat exchanger number 1, I put a T in there, and I run that line back to my freshwater tank. And so, but in that line, I cut in a solenoid valve. And so that solenoid valve is in its closed position when the power's off. But when I flip the switch and turn it on, it opens that valve and releases the pressure, because now I have water going into my tank. And so that creates a loop, a freshwater loop, where water is circulating through my system. So my pump comes on, it pumps it through my filters, it goes through the heat exchanger, and then comes through the solenoid valve and back into my freshwater tank. So if the temperature is a bit cool, sometimes that circulation, just moving the water through all that stuff, might be enough to keep it from freezing. Now if it's a bit colder, I can simply turn my heater on, my hydronic heater on, and that'll heat the water and return it back to the tank. So not only am I running circulating hot water through my lines and through my filters, but I'm also pumping that back into the tank. My lines and my heater or my tank are all insulated, and so I have a Pro Timer by S-Bar, so that allows me to set multiple on-off times and durations in there. And so now I can set my hot water heater to come on maybe a couple times during the night and run for 30 minutes or an hour, whatever's necessary depending on the temperature, so it's not running all night. So we'll just kick on, circulate the warm water, cut off, kick back on, and that'll keep that water from freezing in the system. The layout or the design for the shower is exactly the same. The only difference is when the hot water comes out of heat exchanger number 2, that's where I cut the T in and run that line back to my shower tank, put the solenoid valve in there. When that solenoid valve releases the pressure, then the water is pumped from my shower. The pump comes on, the water comes from the shower tank, it goes through my filtration system, through my UV light, through my heat exchanger, back into the tank, recirculates it. If I need heat, I kick my hydronic heater on, winterization, done. So, in the spirit of transparency, guys, I have not tested this winterization process. So once I get it in cold temperatures, I'll be able to give you more. Right now, it just seems to me that it'll work very well. I don't know how long I'll have to run it. I don't know what the energy output's going to be for that and any of those things. But this is how I'm handling winterizing all the stuff under my van, and I will keep you posted on how that works out. So I hope I've answered all your questions and comments. Again, guys, we really appreciate your comments and questions. They're kind of what makes this channel unique, and that you guys are able to ask questions and we can talk back to you. So we're really trying to form a community here. And in that light, if you guys could just please reach up and hit the share button and share on the other aspects of social media, we really appreciate that. We've got a lot of other good tech talks coming out, and we've got a video coming out explaining how I landed on my head. And so thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one. Stay safe. Cheers.
If you liked this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when we put out new videos. To see behind the scenes action and help support our journey, head over to our YouTube membership page. You can find the link in the video description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in a few days.